Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan.
And I'm Dan Beecher.
And you are listening to the Data Over Dogma podcast, where we bring you greater access to the academic study of the Bible and religion and combat the spread of misinformation about the same. And before we get into anything, Dan, I wanted to share a brief note about an episode from a couple of weeks ago where we talked about God regretting / repenting. Because a helpful listener pointed out that I had two different words confused. When I was talking about the roots nacham, I mentioned that it was related to the word for the womb, and that is actually a different noun, rechem, and I had those two confused in my head. Little slip of the brain there. It doesn't affect my commentary. It doesn't affect the argument against the claim that God does not regret or repent, but I do want to keep it 100 and make sure I'm acknowledging when I made mistakes, and a helpful listener pointed that out. So
I like that. I think, it is the official position of this podcast that admitting when you make a mistake makes you more credible, not less, everybody. So if that's not your position, then Dan, you've just lost all credibility.
Well, there are a lot of people for whom I never had any credibility to begin with. So
there you go.
I think the balances are not thrown too far off.
I'm lucky. I'm in the position where I don't have to be credible. You're the only one that I'm incredible and you're credible.
Yeah, well, there's that great line from I think it was the first Mission Impossible movie with Tom Cruise. I'm going to miss being disreputable. I wish I could be disreputable sometimes.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to. You have to be the reputable one.
Dang it.
I get to be as disreputable as I want to be.
Well,
so this week on the show, we got a fun show coming up.
We're gonna try something different.
You're gonna take us straight to hell.
Yep.
To start us out with for a all right, let's see it, and then we're gonna go chapter and verse, and you're gonna explain to me why something in the Bible feels like it contradicts itself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that what you're going to do is just completely harmonize everything and it'll all work out great and everyone will feel at peace.
We're going to make these texts get together, sing Kumbaya, and it's going to be a great time.
All right. But first...
All right, let's see it. You mentioned a pastor or author from a handful of years ago. I think we're at an age now where a few years ago means 15 years ago.
Yeah,
so
it felt like only a few years ago, but yeah, there was a guy named Carlton Pearson who made waves. He was the pastor of one of the largest Pentecostal congregations in the country.
Okay,
and he was out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he came out as being no longer believing in hell. He said it just didn't line up with either his theology or his reading of the Bible, and that just blew minds across the country. And since then, I have seen plenty of debate about what is hell. Does the Bible talk about hell? What was it just made up? What's going on? So, Dan, help us. There was a movie with Chiwetel Ejiofor. I have no idea if that's how to pronounce it. Chiwetel, I know you're a listener. Write in, help me understand how to say your name. But
send a recording, preferably, rather than just write it.
Yeah, or just call me. Well, I'll give you my number. You can call me anyway. Help us out here. If this was as big a bombshell as it was, we should know what we're talking about here. It seems like it would be obvious, but it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, and it there are a lot of arguments on social media. I see it a lot on Instagram, on TikTok, on other places where people insist that the concept of hell as a place of eternal conscious torment is something that's not anywhere in the Bible, but was developed post-biblically, perhaps even as late as some of the early English literature, or even pre-English literature, Italian literature, Dante and others. Maybe that's where the concept of hell as burning forever in a lake of fire comes from. But there's actually a lot to say about concepts of the afterlife in ancient Israel and early Judaism and in early Christianity. And it's a little more complex than this black and white, oh, it wasn't in the Bible, and then after the Bible, it just popped up. There's actually a long history of innovation on concepts of the afterlife that go from nothing remotely approximating our concept of hell to how we understand the concept of hell today generally. So
Okay.
I want to start all the way in ancient Israel, however. There is a popular idea that there was no concept of the afterlife in ancient Israel, that you died, that was annihilation, that was everything. You just ceased to exist consciously, physically, metaphorically, grammatically, ecumenically, just in every possible sense.
Oh man, your grammar dies with you? That is rough. That is
But
rough.
but that doesn't really fit with the archaeological data. One of the interesting things about ancient Israel and the material remains is we have a lot of material remains that come from tombs and from graves, and partly because everybody just shoved a bunch of stuff underground, sealed it up, and that happens to preserve things quite nicely in the drier climates, like in Egypt, like in parts of Israel. And so we've got a lot of grave goods, and this is actually responsible for a bias towards grave goods. Like when we reconstruct what we have about the ancient world, it seems they were really focused on the grave and the tomb. And really, it's because that's where we find most of the stuff that we happen to find. So
In
there's a little,
fairness to the people who take that approach, pretty much everybody from the ancient times did die.
yeah.
So it makes sense to recognize that, there were a lot of graves.
Yeah, there were a lot of graves. We don't find nearly all of them, but the majority, I don't know exactly what percentage, but there is definitely a disproportionate amount of our material remains from the ancient world that are grave goods. And two books I just want to highlight if you want to go learn more about the grave and the afterlife in ancient Israel. One was one that recently came out by a scholar named Carrie Sonia, and it's called Caring for the Dead in Ancient Israel. That's a wonderful book. And then another one by a friend of mine, Chris Hayes, called A Covenant with Death. And the subtitle is Death in the Iron Age 2 and its Rhetorical Uses in Proto-Isaiah. But there's wonderful information in there about the fact that the things that were provided to the dead seem to indicate that ancient Israelites believed the dead kept on living in one sense or another, and that whatever this agency that kept on existing, whether you want to call it a spirit or a soul or a ghost or whatever this agency that kept on existing was, it in some sense was kind of tethered to the corporeal body, to the remains of the dead and to the location of them. And so we would see people providing food, providing light, providing protection for the deceased in the afterlife. And we also see them communing with the deceased in different ways, visiting them at prescribed intervals to have feasts or to petition them for aid or to seek information from them. So necromancy was phenomenally common in ancient Israel.
Necromancy, help me out with that word, because
Yeah.
it sounds magical or whatever, but in this case,
It's basically seeking information from the dead, communing with them to engage in some kind of exchange of information.
yeah, and it's interesting to say that. I mean, you started this part of your segment by saying that people are saying that the ancient Hebrews had no concept of an afterlife, but now I'm realizing that I remember there being stories. The witch of Endor jumps to mind, where someone is called back from the dead, or someone is communicated with after they've died.
So that's the necromancer of Endor. She her profession has been outlawed by Saul, but then Saul is in a bind and he needs to get information from Adonai, and the prophets aren't doing it for him. So in disguise, he visits the necromancer of Endor. and wants to call up Samuel, and it works. And the necromancer says, I see Elohim, I see deity rising up from the underworld. And Saul asks, what is its form? And basically Samuel's coming there to say, you should have let me sleep. And and then says Saul is going to die in battle, and that's what ends up happening. But yeah, we see some interesting things there. One, Samuel is still extant, still exists in the sense that they are some kind of, I don't want to say incorporeal or immaterial, but some kind of fleshly sense, and they're referred to as an Elohim, as a deity, which kind of attests to the overlap in the concept of ancestors and deities.
Interesting.
But you have care and feeding for the dead because they kept on existing in some sense. And there's a way, this is kind of like the movie Coco, where they were thought to exist as long as they were remembered. And so some of the ways that people would try to ensure that they were remembered for longer periods is they would pay to have their name pronounced over their mortuary chapel or something like that. Or the families were expected to go make offerings to commune with them to pronounce their name, because the pronunciation of their name, in a sense, was a materialization of their name, in a sense, extended their post-mortem existence. And the nature of this post-mortem existence is not incredibly clear. From what we can tell from the biblical text, it was just kind of a dreary, murky, ambiguous just existence of some kind that was, we get the sense that it was fraught with all kinds of dangers associated with malevolent or benevolent forces that might exist in this world of the deceased, but also somehow the deceased also had access to strategic information, and so could be petitioned for aid. People would go, and in this type of worship we refer to as ancestor worship, they could go petition their ancestors for aid, or say, hey, can you get so-and-so to stop stealing my stuff, or to give back my stuff, or you had imprecatory petitions and things like that too. So
you just used a word I do not know.
Imprecatory, which has to do with cursing. So imprecatory means I'm putting some kind of curse on you. I'm saying something.
Go spook my neighbor. He's a jerk.
Or make somebody fall in love with me, or make somebody not be in love with me. Like, there were all kinds of different ways that the deceased could help out. But this realm of the dead was the same for everybody. There was no distinction between the good and the evil. It was the same place for everyone. And in the Hebrew, the word most commonly associated with this realm was Sheol, which it could mean the grave literally, or it could mean the grave figuratively, the realm of the dead. And so everybody was destined for Sheol in one sense or another. And in many English translations of the Bible, Sheol is translated hell or grave or pit or something like that. But
in and of itself, that word doesn't have a negative or a positive connotation.
It's negative in the sense that it's mysterious, it's murky,
and it sucks to be dead.
Yeah, it's going to suck to be there, but there's not a distinction of do good and you'll get on, you'll be in the better part of Sheol. It was just everybody's going to Sheol. And so you did good or bad, or how you acted in life really only affected your lot in life, because once you were dead, everybody's lot was the same.
Interesting.
So when we get into the Hellenistic period, when we have a lot more interactions with first the Zoroastrian societies and then the Greco-Roman societies, we start to see some bleeding into Judaism, these concepts of Hades on the Greco-Roman side of things, and a kind of dualism on the Zoroastrian side of things. And you start to see people distinguishing a different kind of abode in the afterlife for those who do bad and for those who do good. And I get the sense there's still an argument to make. It's still debated, but I would argue that the concept of punishment in the afterlife probably derived from early Jewish experiences with larger empires that were oppressing them, and the observation that there did not seem to be punishment for the wicked in this life, because the people who seem to be the most successful and the most powerful and the most wealthy frequently were also the most wicked and the most evil, and they didn't ever really seem to get their comeuppance.
Right.
And so I think there's an argument to make that the concept of divine punishment in the afterlife is rooted in some sense in fantasizing about the incredibly wicked and evil and powerful people of the world getting their just desserts, if not in this life, then in the life to come.
Well, it makes sense. How can one believe in a just deity, in a just God, and yet justice doesn't come to the worst people that they can think of, the people who have most hurt their people? There's got, it just makes a lot of sense to imagine a justice that comes after this life.
Yeah, and we see these debates about in wisdom literature, in Job and Ecclesiastes and elsewhere, this idea of why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. There doesn't seem to be any justice. Well, once you can tack on what Latter-day Saints are used to calling the eternal perspective, or the fact that there's an afterlife and so everything can be resolved in the afterlife, that is a convenient that's a convenient way to outsource that problem and say,
Yes.
oh, that we'll take care of that in the afterlife. So I'm going to posit, and I am working on research on this, and we'll publish something hopefully at some point in the future. And I know some other people are working on similar projects as well. That is one of the main foundations of the concept of divine punishment. But we begin to see the concept of divine punishment popping up in the Hebrew Bible, in some of the most recent layers of the Hebrew Bible, in some of the most recent passages. So one is in Daniel 12, which was written in the middle of the 2nd century BCE. Again, this is under heavy persecution from the Seleucid Empire, these Greco-Roman folks that are oppressing them. And the other is the very last verse of the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 66:24, where we have this statement. I'm reading from the NRSV here. And they shall go out and look at the dead bodies of the people who have rebelled against me. For their worm shall not die, their fire shall not be quenched, and they shall be an abhorrence to all flesh. So this idea is that these people are going to see the place where these bodies are amassed, and the worm shall not die, the fire shall not be quenched. Now, this doesn't have to be interpreted to mean they will experience this pain and this torment for eternity. This can just mean the worms and the fire that the people are seeing doesn't go away. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be feeling that. But here we see this concept of divine punishment that gets picked up in later authors, and particularly this idea of the worm that does not die and the fire should not be quenched is going to pop up in the New Testament. But
and the idea is that, this concept of an undying worm is baffling me a little bit. The idea is not anything to do with the worm other than these bodies do not stop being eaten. Somehow they I mean, one would think that after a while of being worm digested, you're just goo, but apparently worms like goo.
Well,
and burnt goo at that, because the fires are still going.
Yeah, and so this is pretty horrific imagery. It's hyperbolic imagery where you're just imagining these bodies just rotting and being consumed for eternity by worms and being burned for eternity, without necessarily saying they're going to feel all that for eternity.
Right.
But we have some other literature that is not part of what we understand as the canonical Bible that is reflecting on this as well. The book of First Enoch, for instance, seems to be one of the innovators of the concepts that are going to be picked up later on, and particularly as it relates to the word Gehenna, which is in the New Testament, in the Greek transliteration, frequently translated hell in English translations. Now, Gehenna is in the Hebrew Bible, if you go look it up in your Bible, it's referred to as the valley of the son of Hinnom. So, Ge ben Hinnom is the word in Hebrew, but it becomes Gehenna in the or Gehinnom in the Greco-Roman period. And this is an actual valley that kind of swoops down and runs to the south and then to the southeast around Mount Zion. It meets up with the Central Valley and the Kidron Valley coming down around both sides of the city of David. And this valley is where Tophet was located. And Tophet is a name that's used in the Hebrew Bible to refer to the place where the pre-exilic kings of Israel made their children to pass through the fire. In other words, engaged in child sacrifice. So this place is associated with unspeakable evil in the eyes of the folks who are curating these traditions in the exilic and in the post-exilic period. Now, I want to stop and make a quick qualification here. There is an idea that this place around the time of Jesus was a landfill where there were perpetually burning fires, or where the bodies of criminals were tossed. And so there's this idea that this is just this perpetually burning place of filth and dead bodies and stench and all this. And there are no archaeological or textual data that actually support that.
Interesting. I have heard those theories.
Yeah.
That's something that has popped up in my just looking around. So,
and that's something that we don't see anybody making those claims until many centuries after the time of Jesus. And I was just in that valley a couple weeks ago. It's a lovely park down there. So
no garbage.
No garbage at all. Grass, green grass. There's a little rope bridge that goes across part of the valley that you can go run across if you're brave enough. And they have a little concert venue on one end of it. It's a lovely area. So I tell people, I told the tour group I was with, you can tell people now you've been to hell, and there's a lovely park.
There you go.
And,
absolutely.
Yeah. So
and very few child sacrifices.
Yeah, that's all in the past.
That's gone way down.
Yeah.
Since the exilic period.
But when we get into the Hellenistic period, because this valley is associated with unspeakable evil and with child sacrifice and with burning, it becomes kind of a symbolic location for wickedness and punishment. So we have in the book of Enoch a reference to this valley right by Jerusalem where certain entities, we've got some angels who are being buried under mountains, and we've got some other who are being reserved in this deep, dark valley where they're going to be punished. And we first have a reference to or a suggestion that this is a place for eternal post-mortem punishment. So First Enoch is kind of the seedbed for this idea. And
talk to me about Enoch. I don't know.
So First Enoch,
well.
Yeah, it's a lot of people don't, and even the people who spend all of their time on TikTok making videos about First Enoch frequently don't understand what it is. But
Okay.
it's in a sense it's a retelling of some of the main stories from Genesis and particularly focused on Genesis 6, the kind of setting the stage for the flood, where it talks about the B'nai Elohim, the children of God, seeing the daughters of humanity, seeing that they're beautiful, going down, marrying them, having children with them. And then it says in the text of Genesis, the Nephilim were in the land in those days and after as well. And then it goes straight into, and so the Lord saw that everything was corrupt and wanted to destroy the earth. And so it's probably an older disconnected tradition that was inserted in this spot to kind of buttress the idea that God was perfectly validated in wanting to destroy everything that breathed on the earth. But what First Enoch does is pick up that story and kind of expand on it, fill in a lot of the gaps, and use that as kind of a conceptual template for the story about angels rebelling against God, coming down and inappropriately engaging in sexual intercourse with human women and siring these giants. And then the giants have children who are the Nephilim, and they die. And then the ghosts or the spirits that rise up from their deceased bodies become demons. And the angels teach humanity everything, all the wickedness from warfare to makeup.
Interesting.
And so it's really
we're gonna have to do a whole episode.
Oh yeah, definitely. First Enoch needs to have a whole discussion, and this is one of the most influential non-biblical texts in this period. This sets the stage for so much that goes on regarding angels, regarding the source of evil, and in part this was a way to account for where evil came from. We have the problem of evil, of theodicy. How does we get evil from every creation that was all good? And it's, well, these angels rebelled. And they came down and they basically physically reproduced evil and then spread knowledge of evil.
And when was this book written?
So this is Greco-Roman period, Hellenistic period. It's probably the earliest phases of it are probably somewhere around 300 BCE or after. And it kind of cumulatively picks up a bunch of stories. So there are several, I think there are 5 distinct books within the book of Enoch, and they are generally dated to different periods by scholars, starting around 300 BCE down to probably close to the turn of the era. Well, actually, some of the later layers of some of these books probably becomes in the Common Era rather than before the Common Era. But there's an issue with identifying this as the origins of hell, is that eternal conscious torment is not the only concept that is reflected in there. We also have 2 other concepts of divine punishment in the afterlife. One of them is annihilationism, the idea that the wicked, when they die, they just stop existing. And the other is temporary torment followed by annihilationism, the idea that the wicked are punished for a time, and then there comes a point when they stop existing entirely. So I think the best scholarship on the development of these concepts would identify 3 different general categories of post-mortem divine punishment: annihilationism, temporary torment followed by annihilationism, and then eternal conscious torment. And we have this reflected in First Enoch. We have this reflected in places like the book of Judith from the Apocrypha, which is quoting or at least alluding to Isaiah 66 and the fire and the worms. And we have it in a handful of other texts. We have even Josephus discussing things like this. We have some rabbinic literature that's discussing things like this, the Apocalypse of Abraham, Second Baruch, a number of texts that are considered Apocrypha or pseudepigrapha or other early Jewish writings are kind of, we see one or more of these 3 different categories bubbling to the surface. And so what we can say is that the concept of hell or divine punishment in the afterlife is not yet systematized. It's kind of ambiguous. It's inconsistent. People are making use of different ways of thinking about it to the degree it serves their rhetorical goals, but it has not sifted out into one kind of universal idea. That's something that would not come until after the Bible. So in the New Testament, we see all 3 of these categories as well. We have we have this idea of the worm and the fire reflected in places like Mark and Matthew, and we have Jesus talking about divine punishment as eternal conscious torment, but we also have Jesus talking about it as if it's just annihilationism or as if it's temporary torment followed by annihilationism. We have all of that in the Gospels. So it is not a systematized concept yet in the Gospels. Some of the other literature in the New Testament similarly reflects one or more of these concepts. Paul doesn't talk about it at all. We don't have any of them in Paul. And probably the place where we get the most imagery that is going to be picked up later in the systematization of hell, in the programmatization. I don't even know what that word should be, but
I think you nailed it.
when they finally decide hell is going to be this, they pull a lot of the imagery from the book of Revelation, where we have this idea of a lake of fire, and we have this dragon, and we have Satan, and there's throwing down of stuff. But even death and hell in the book of Revelation come to an end. And so we're fans on this channel of rejecting univocality. So even the concept of hell is not presented univocally in any single gospel, much less in all the gospels, much less across the entire New Testament. It is entirely inconsistent, and it is not until early Christianity becomes institutionalized and gains political support and resources once it takes over the Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th centuries CE, that we get the means of systematizing everything and then enforcing a single concept of hell, which does reduce down to this concept of eternal conscious torment. But for the authors of the New Testament, there's no one concept of hell. Some of them don't refer to any of these concepts of hell. Some of them refer to multiple different ones. And these are influenced by Greco-Roman ideas of Hades. They're influenced by what's going on in the book of Enoch. They're influenced perhaps by Zoroastrianism, although we don't have a lot of great data to show us exactly how it was influenced. And so hell comes together from a number of different streams of traditions that begin inconsistently and don't really arrive at what we understand today about hell until well after the Bible has been completed. And then we also have, obviously, that other literature, Dante and others that are giving us additional imagery that contribute to the accumulated kind of conceptual package that we generally evoke today when we talk about hell.
Right. So sort of circling back to Pastor Pearson that I mentioned at the beginning of this segment.
Yes.
Would you say that there is a valid argument to be made that there is no hell? Do you think that is because there are so many different concepts presented biblically? Is that a tenable position, or do you think that that somehow we have to, if we're following the Bible, there is some hell-like concept that is likely to be more likely than not?
I think if you're talking about the Bible as a single text, and if you are going to impose a univocal lens upon it and say, we have to reduce it down to one concept, then that concept is going to be negotiated. And I think all of those possibilities are there. You have everything from absolutely no reference whatsoever to post-mortem divine punishment, all the way to eternal conscious torment across the different authors of the Bible. So I would suggest that any one of those positions is arguable if you're trying to accommodate a univocal take. If you're trying to say, we have the text, we must arrive at a single conclusion with the text, then that is a negotiated conclusion, and any one of those is tenable. If we're saying, what did the authors of these texts believe about divine punishment, you have to say there are authors that say absolutely nothing about it, that it's not relevant, certainly not salient. They may have not believed in it at all. Then there are other authors who treat it one way, other authors who treat it another, and we have authors that treat it a variety of different ways. So I think it's murky, and it's a little more complex than just saying, yes, it's there, or no, it's not there. It depends on what you're doing with the text. It depends on how you understand the text and its function. And it depends on, I suppose it depends upon the group that you're doing it for. What are your goals for this?
All right. Well, thankfully, our next segment isn't going to be anywhere near as confusing. Well, don't worry. We'll find a way to make the Bible all say one thing. Just stick with us.
Yeah, this is the problem of putting data over dogma, is it frequently does not kind of sift out into one easy answer. The answer is usually yes with a but, or no with an and, or something that just entirely confusing. So,
or just pick one.
Yeah, it's up to you. If I can show up and muddy up the waters and then scamper away, I've done my job.
Good. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We sure do appreciate that. If you would like to become a part of helping to make this show go, you can go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/dataoverdogma. You can write into us. Contact at dataoverdogmapod.com is the way to do that. And until next week, have a good one.
Bye, everybody.